All right. All right. All right. Here we are. Oh, cool. All right. Whoop. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. Um, how's it going, guys? How are you? We've got Joseph Wood on the line. I'm calling, and I will get him on the line in a moment. Thank you all for hanging out with me today. Thank you for being here. We're live on YouTube. Rockfin, Colin, please do all the liking and the subscribing, and if you feel so moved, do the oops, hold on, we don't need all this right this second. um Anyways, this means that something's working. Do the liking, the subscribing, and the donating if you feel moved. buymeacoffee.com/blackbearnews. Osama bought me a couple coffees after hours. Thank you. He says, you've got caffeine. Yes, I do. Thank you, Osama. I appreciate that. Right on. We're here on a Sunday afternoon, a day when a lot of people are going to be paying attention to a piece of grass, I guess, or a green piece of turf. And then people will be going back and forth, running back and forth on this green piece of turf. And then everybody will either cheer or yell, maybe get drunk, eat some chips. I don't know. That's what some people are doing. Me, I don't know what I'm going to be doing. Okay, so let's get into this. We were going to have Joseph come on and talk us through a little bit about this Sabine Hossenfelder video, which is titled "I Misunderstood the Greenhouse Effect. Here's how it works." And I actually watched this video again this morning. There are parts of this that are a little confusing and quite scientific, and I think it's good to know and understand if you can know and understand. For some reason, I can't have any sound on this. Why? Why don't I have sound on this? That don't make no sense. Hold on. I mean, okay, on some level, I'll just give you are you guys hearing a crackle? If there's a crackle, let me know. Okay. Or do you guys hear a crackle or no? It's intermittent. You mean like you're talking about the buzz? Oh, Kevin Jensen, I don't know what you're hearing because I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. Yeah, I'm not gonna stop what I'm doing. Hold on. I'm just trying to get some sound on this. I don't know why. Usually I have an issue with Twitter and sound, but not generally YouTube. Here we go. Yay. All right, so I'm going to bring Joseph in, and we'll just kind of talk about this video because he actually referred me to this video explaining how it all really works. And again, I just want to say, like, it's okay to understand. It's okay to understand. It's okay to understand it on a simple level, right? Like you know, she's explaining this a very, kind of more in depth and more of a physics from a physics point of view, the very complicated processes that go into creating global warming. But you can also just understand the simplified version, which is we get radiation and the molecules trap radiation, and that's actually true. That's what happens, and it's creating a warming effect. So that's all you really need to understand. But she just goes into it a little in depth, and I thought it was interesting. And I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it a little bit. So, Joseph, how's it going? Oh, I have to be able to hear you. There you are. Hold on 1 second, Joseph. All right, try again, Joseph. Hello? Can you say something?
Hello.
Oh, there you are. I'm just trying to get you in. Okay, I think I can hear you now.
Isn't there a camera? I can hear you.
Yeah, well, there is video. I mean, I think we're just going to do...
That's cool. I was just wondering because I okay.
If you want, hold on 1 second. If you want,
no, don't hassle it in the middle of your show. I was just trying to hassle. I thought I did something wrong because of what you said on the message. So it's cool.
No, I was going to send you a link for StreamYard, so you can actually be in the. So you can be. Hold on. I mean, I can still do that. Do you want me to send you a link?
Time. Let's do it next time.
I mean, I can just send it to you right now. It's all good.
Well, I might mess it up because I'm on my phone and you never know.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, then let's let's stay
next time.
Let's stay here.
Yeah.
All right. It's okay. It's all right. We got a little mixed up in communication.
It's cool.
So let me see. I'll just play just a brief bit of this, but we'll talk more than I'll play a few parts of this, but we'll talk a little bit about this. Hold on.
Turned out I got it completely wrong. I was about to sweep my misunderstanding under the carpet, but then I thought, what if I'm not the only one? What if we're all just pretending to kind of understand something we're spending trillions of dollars on? Maybe I should talk about it after all. So, how does the greenhouse effect really work? How do we know that global warming is caused by humans? And what predictions have climate models ever made? That's what we'll talk about today.
All right. I'm just going to stop it right there because I like that she says, well, this is something that seems so important that we need to, throw trillions of dollars at it. Maybe we should talk about it, right? So I like that she's not coming from a point of like, well, deniers are just stupid and they don't understand, or people that don't, this is settled science. She's not coming from that level. And so I appreciate that. She's like, well, how about some science, right? I don't know. So it takes a while for her to actually get into the nuts and bolts of it. But okay, so maybe where will we start, Joseph?
Well, I have to say I didn't appreciate the difficulty in the communicating of things till after watching some of these videos. So it's a really huge concept, I guess, and a lot of atmospheric scientists don't really fully appreciate the complexity of it either. And even Sabine here, who would fully agree with me, is not including the oceans, which really drives the complexity of the discussion up much further. But you really can't get the whole grasp without talking about the oceans. And she starts with jiggling and in the discussion, and I love that because literally, if you add everything into it, you've got the jiggling frequency and rate of the core, and you've got the jiggling and frequency of the stuff around the core, and you've got the jiggling and frequency of the mantle around all that. You've got the jiggling and frequency of the land masses that are floating.
Well, let me stop you there and just say, like, when you're talking about jiggling, she's talking about the jiggling, the energy, the excitement of the molecules by the the excitement of molecules by the infrared energy, right? The radiation. It creates an effect on the molecules called jiggling
Well,
or
not
wiggling.
just infrared. She gets into where the bulk of the energy of the sun that we get is microwave. And that goes right through the atmosphere into the land masses and oceans.
Uh-huh.
And if you think about I thought about how to talk about this. And I thought, what if you put a bowl of water in your microwave oven?
Okay.
And you heat it up on high. Does the bowl get hot? Or does only the water get hot? And what is that dependent upon?
Right.
And we're kind of talking about the same thing. So it's the energy back after it strikes all that stuff, and it really doesn't strike it. It changes. Part of it stays, part of it goes. Right. And it's transmitting what we are calling infrared. But when physicists talk about infrared, it's kind of like a dance. Because when they say infrared, it can mean temperature or frequency, and it can be the interaction between different temperatures and frequencies that is the physical heat. And heat's really not a thing. It's an interaction of all these wavelengths of energy.
It's a byproduct of the interaction, right?
Exactly. And you can't just send the heat to space. You have to have a wave that is the heat or the space of decoherence of the wave that is what we call energy. It's not really heat. You've transformed microwave and higher frequencies energy into a volume of lower frequency energy. So when you're sending a volume of lower frequency energy and a higher frequency came in, there was a momentum exchange. So it's very confusing to talk about as though you're just reflecting it into space, because you're taking different frequencies and interacting with them and changing the stuff around them or not. And where is that momentum going? And well, most of it goes into the land and oceans, and then the amount of jiggle of all that transmitting and movement that's left over and reflected goes back through the atmosphere, and what you're left over is less blue energy that's invisible to everything going out and more red energy. So we've taken in the high energy, heated up, kept it low, which she shows with that element around the earth, and then sent some lower noise outward that used to be less volume but higher frequency, bluer.
Right. Okay. Well, so that's kind of a little bit what I want to get into, and let's stay right there for a moment. But like, yes, a lot of what she's talking about is the fact that some energy gets absorbed and some gets reflected. Right. The albedo effect and or what happens when energy strikes the earth is like some gets absorbed and some gets reflected, right? Some shoots back out into space, simply, but like, and how much of which of what is going somewhere to create an effect as in global warming, right?
Right. So she explains that part of it pretty well. And what she's leaving out is the part I said about the core of the earth and the ocean and the land masses, because that gets into some fundamental stuff that's really tough. But that's the real energy, because Earth also has its own intrinsic frequency and rate that it vibrates at. And that's why it's blue and green to look at from space, and why we have a blue sky, is how all that stuff she says in the video works with the spin and differentials of our orbits and spin with the bulk of the mass. Lots of energy there.
Oh yeah.
And when how do you talk about that and add it into the atmospheric view of climate change? In even Sabina's video, that you can go into that for months and write books about.
Oh sure. Well, and so okay. Here's the part that I just want to talk about a little bit about the exchange. The interesting thing that she said the thing that caught my attention was that the atmosphere and the temperature of Earth is seeking balance, right? There's a thing going on. She talked about how warm the Earth would be if we had no atmosphere, which relates to how much energy we're receiving from the sun, right? And how much we're reflecting at a constant rate. That's what it would be without the atmosphere. Would be negative 16 Celsius, right?
Because there's nothing to hold anything above the surface where there's thermal mass. Remember our talk about thermal mass, right?
So with the atmosphere, we have what a bit of a constant, right? A temperature that the Earth is held at, constant-ish.
Can we pause right there where you're at?
Please.
Because that's a good place to pause for added going into space and heat without the atmosphere. Notice it's cold at the surface, but the landmass underneath, right, is still the same relative temperature. Yes, right. So where's that heat going? Nowhere. It's held underneath to the point of expansion limit that the material has to take up the space that it's allowed for in that motion. And if you add an ocean on that, and then add the gravity physics that she's not talking about, then you get an atmosphere. So to not have an atmosphere, you also not have to have an ocean.
Right.
So I'm sorry if that confused where you were.
No, not at all. But that's what I'm still. Yeah, no, not at all, because
it's a big link, is all I'm saying.
Right, and there is so yes, the core of the Earth, right, has a warmth, a heat value, right, or
a lot of it, yeah.
Right,
and if you didn't have the mantle, you wouldn't see that until you went inside the core. It would be further inward,
right,
for the same reasons.
Right, and so it would work in the same way. Adding the atmosphere and the oceans on top just creates another layer of kind of the same, I guess, transfer or balance.
Well,
maybe
capacitance and inertial mass with a capacitance ability to hold on to so much weight in the form of energy and heat, right? Whereas Mars doesn't have enough land mass for stuff to do that, so the water goes right to space. Whereas Earth has enough land mass and core to hang on to stuff gravimetrically, and we send hydrogen to space. So when we lose heat, if we're losing more red energy, we're losing more larger inertial mass in the form of hydrogen, which she's not getting into. That's a whole other ball of wax to talk about.
It's even more complicated.
Yes. That's postdoc stuff, and she's how to do a video on that easily without a lot of math. I don't know.
Right.
But it's the same discussion. So Earth is in a unique position in the solar system, and with a unique conglomeration of mass to be able to hold oceans and air. And if you're talking about stratification of thermal mass in the air, like she's doing really well, she does that extremely well. And you have to then step off the diving board into the oceans and see how that stratification she's talking about is literally a differential between the thermal mass layering of the ocean and its relationship to the spin of the Earth, etc.
Yeah.
Along with the incoming energy of the sun, because what we're assuming here is that the incoming energy of the sun remains constant. At a subatomic level, it doesn't.
Right.
In a Newtonian way, it does.
Right.
So that's our assumption in her video, is that that's always constant.
That there's fluctuations, but there's a constant-ish, right?
Yes, we change that every time we change the inertial stability or harmonics of the Earth, which is how you started your what you were just saying.
Right. So, let's get into the part where another part that was interesting to me. So, so it's the atmosphere, or the entirety of the planet is seeking some kind of balance, like a thermal balance, right? And it's the energy that it holds, right? And the atmosphere is holding a particular amount of energy, right? And creating, creating the temperature at which we have a stable climate, right? Or the climate that we know now.
Right? In relation to the land and oceans, yes.
Right. So she talks about the layers of the atmosphere and how they hold on to heat and also emit heat out into space. And there was a guy, to get into it, yesterday I mentioned there was a guy that used to be on my show all the time, on the chat, not on the show. But he would say, global warming isn't a thing to worry about because the more energy we take in, or the more heat that happens on the planet, we will eventually emit more heat in order to seek the balance. Like, he kind of had the idea that she was talking about on some levels correct, but he was missing some of the parts of it. So.
And those parts are just a world of difference.
Right.
So, right. So,
yeah.
So yeah, does heat go to space? Not from a specific physics standpoint. Radiation goes to space.
Right.
But frequency shifting is happening from blue to red in what we're radiating to space. So ultimately, we are hanging on to more and more momentum in the atmosphere and oceans. And you see that in the thermal layering of mass, which Jim Massa, again, does lots of videos about. From an ocean scientist's perspective, hearing atmospheric discussions must be extremely frustrating for these same reasons.
Sure.
Because none of that happens in the atmosphere without preloading the oceans with a lot of stuff. And so we're missing 700,000 years of talk in each atmospheric discussion, because the atmosphere is a much shorter talk. You know, the time frame of reaction and of observation in the atmosphere much shorter than the oceans.
Yes. And the oceans are much better at holding on to that energy than the atmosphere is, right?
Infinitely, almost.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, the oceans are really holding on to that energy. And then, so
really,
if you leave the oceans out of the equation, that's a big part you're leaving out.
That's the panic in my voice every time we talk. Yeah, it's like It's like a big spring that you're winding down with the rotation of the moon and the earth and the core, and no one's even got it in the discussion openly. And yet I know behind the scenes people that have to be talking about this till they're crying.
Of course, sure,
right.
But to get back to you were talking about the different types of emission, but it is an interesting part of the process that the upper atmosphere and the stratosphere are helping to kind of try to balance the energy or heat energy or whatever you want to call it by emitting more into space, more energy into space, right?
Well, no, more red energy, right?
Okay. Right.
So for red, if you shine a flashlight up, right? Let's take away all the air so it's less confusing. If you shine a flashlight upward, if you start off with blue light, that blue light changes to red because the energy of the batteries in the flashlight don't have the amps, the current, to keep pushing that dense amount of energy up. So you've got wiggles in blue. For every centimeter you travel, there's way more wiggles in blue light than red light. Right. So if you look at Earth as emitting the same overall energy, but it's got a much higher volume of amplitude of red than it used to, it's got less amplitude of blue going out.
Okay. Got
it. So it's a really complicated discussion.
Sure.
Are you losing heat overall? No, you're heating up overall for the flashlight reason. And I don't know that that's an easy discussion even with some scientists to have. It would take some time sitting down and going over stuff because of all the specific specialization that's happened in sciences. This is something I had to learn, and think about.
Okay.
I'm not an atmospheric scientist. The only research officially that I was involved in physics was condensed matter, which gives me a unique perspective on this kind of stuff. But my experience is not something generally lent to this kind of stuff.
Right. Got it. Well, and then another point I wanted to talk about is towards the end of the video, they talked about why global warming is caused by us, and it's because the stratosphere is cooling. And that was that was something that kind of went by me the first time, a little bit. But so if we were receiving more, if heating was due to the sun, the stratosphere would be heating, and the atmosphere, the lower atmosphere would be heating too.
There you go. That's the important thing, is the constant rate of income.
So the reason why the sun thing doesn't work is because the stratosphere is actually cooling.
Yes, we're
in
adding
them.
mass like a heat pump to the system, which gives it the spin, the ability to force more energy into the oceans and land than previously,
Yeah.
to a point, and then you start heating up the atmosphere after you start hitting points where it can't take it at the same rate.
Right.
That's
Oh.
what she's talking about.
Yeah. So that was it. That was a key point in the video. Like, this is why the sun. It's not the sun. This is why it's not the sun, because if it was the sun,
Exactly.
the stratosphere would be heating as well. And then, something you just said just jogged my memory a little bit about that. Oh, dang, what was it? I had something I wanted to hit on. Dang it, what was it? Oh, so yeah, the absorption. So, this is what it was. She was saying, at pre-industrial levels of carbon, we were already at the peak stasis point of pushing energy out into space, right? In order to balance, like we were already at, we weren't, and so when you said the oceans had to absorb enough heat in order to actually start creating, right? They're pushing the atmospheric, they're driving the rise in the atmospheric heat, right? Is that because the
Right.
oceans have stopped being able to absorb all the heat?
Correct.
Right.
Or at least they have certainly slowed down their absorption, their capacitance capability for it. Yes.
Right. So they were the sponge that was soaking up the excess heat, right? And for a long time, or and then
Since fire and sticks. Yeah.
right. So they've been absorbing all the excess heat, and now they've absorbed too much heat, and they can't absorb anymore. And now it's up. Now the atmosphere is like, well, I guess I'll take on the heat, right? So, and so yeah, she was saying in the atmosphere that is also happening, because prior to our adding, 100 and whatever it is more parts per million of carbon to we were already at capacitance in the atmosphere as far as pushing heat out into space. And so when we added more heat, that actually, now we were already we were already at an imbalance 200 years ago, is what she was saying. And now we've put more, now there's more heat, and now it's like, now we're really at an imbalance.
So to all those high school physics people out there and beyond, and anybody that does cooking, what happens under those conditions? You think of the Earth as having a lid because of gravimetrics, right?
Mm.
You keep adding heat and stuff, you get pressure, and that's what holds the stuff into the ocean. So when you shut down, I'm bringing in masking to the discussion, since that's going to be what's in the comments anyway.
Right.
If you bring in more stuff and more heat and more pressure, once you stop bringing in more stuff, right, and you have the same amount of heat coming in from the sun, you have the same amount of energy from the oceans basically in spin, the atmosphere all of a sudden is not going to have the mass coming in that pumps the heat into the oceans with pressure. So you have, boom, a higher temperature in the atmosphere because the oceans are able to push stuff out into the atmosphere, or energetic things, easier. That's what happens. It's not like they're.
You're gonna have to explain that one again to me, because that one that you lost me a little bit on that one.
Okay. So I'm not.
How does the lack of dimming?
So it's like a heat pump, right? If you have a heat pump and you have the right kind of stuff in the heat pump, and you add pressure with the piston on one side, what you're doing is squeezing out the energy, the ability to wiggle for the stuff you've got. And where does that energy, we see that as a transmission of heat to the material, the copper around it that is pressurized in, given the medium around the copper moves enough to take that energy, those wiggles, and move it somewhere. Right. Well, the Earth is doing the same thing. And the more we load energy in the form of thermal mass in the oceans, it's like a spring. And to keep that spring loaded, you have to keep pushing on it at least the same rate that you've got it pressed under to begin with. Once you end or reduce that pressure.
And that is the dimming part of it? Is that what you're saying? The sulfates and the...
Exactly. It's able to take that material at largely around the ice formations on the water at the poles and on the land masses, and condense that into heat into the most capacitance available to it, which is mountains and ice and oceans and ice. And it's very difficult to measure that. I'm sure they can track some of it and have it, but you get a large exchange of masses where the ocean takes up the mass, not just energy, but actual mass, like the heat pump does. And then on the other side of the heat pump, you've got now a big expansion happening, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got cold freon or whatever you're using, and the atmosphere is the same way. Once it hits that ice, once it hits the stratosphere, rather, it's able to expand and absorb a lot of heat. You see cooling.
Right.
What do we see going into space? That's a real complicated explanation. There is a video on the outline that I've put up having to do with abiogenesis at the core. Dr. What is his name? Eric. I'm sorry. I'll email you that video and his name.
Okay.
He explains the process where hydrogen goes into space really quite well.
Okay.
And that's what we're talking about here overall. And that's left out of most of the climate models also. I don't know why. But you're seeing that as a red shift also. When you see bigger thermal mass go out, the thermal mass of a molecule is not like a photon, right?
Okay.
You've got different inertia states. So you see a color shift. Okay. And I don't know if that answers your question or makes your question worse.
I mean, on some levels it does. I understand this as a layman. I'm not
That's how I'm trying to explain it, but I'm having difficulty myself with doing
it. I mean, I get the basic gist of what you're saying. So, but for me to actually turn around and explain it to somebody else, I'd have a little bit of a difficulty in that. So,
well, how about
that's why I wanted to have you come on and explain it, better than I could, right?
I hope, but I don't know if that's true. Understanding
it's still also
two completely different things.
on a basic communication level, this is why, I can see people who don't understand climate science or don't believe in climate science or are skeptical of it watching this video and just going, this is just a bunch of gobbledygook to me, right? Because it's theoretical and it's hard to understand,
Well, theoretical, that's a big word, isn't it?
It is. But for some people, understanding all this is like, you have theoretical, meaning you have to understand the theories behind what they're explaining, right? You have to understand like how everything works, right?
Well, let me apply this then. So if we send a rocket to space, right, we have so much mass and we need so much energy to produce thrust that cancels the mass's effect of gravity, right? The effect of gravity on that mass.
Yep.
Well, what most people don't know is it's not the rocket going up that does that. It's the rocket's velocity horizontal to the direction of the Earth's spin. And we're basically just wanting the rocket to be able to stay aloft long enough to allow the Earth to spin away from where it falls.
Got it.
Okay? And the same thing goes with everything up there. All the molecules of our atmosphere, and you and me too. Only we're in an inertial state where our distance from that you can't even talk about that with going into some fundamental theoretical physics.
Right.
With the rocket, we can talk about it without fundamental skill, right? Without fundamental physics.
Sure.
It's just a matter of scale. So the same theories are keeping the rocket and satellites up in space that we're talking about now. It's just a much different scale.
Sure.
Does that help?
Yeah, I think that helps. For sure.
Okay.
For sure.
What do your chatters think?
Well, somebody is asking, so this speaker doesn't believe any light can be reflected back into space, like marine cloud brightening, mirrors, gold reflecting surfaces to cool anything? What do you think?
Not to cool
or
anything.
Increasing albedo? Would that help?
Right. See, that's where albedo. So let's talk about albedo. So if you have and you can look this up on some of Yi Tao's argument as well, and he's big on reflecting energy.
Mm-hmm.
He'll tell you in his writings or his talks that the albedo of a solar panel is such that the heat trapped by the solar panel day in and day out is much greater than any effect you might have in savings from producing electricity from it without looking at anything else. And even that's a great oversimplification, because in a condensed matter way of talking about it, I could say you can bury the panel, 5 feet underground, and the inertial drag of the panel is going to change the nature of everything we've talked about and add every single cycle, day and year, more energy to the system in the form of inertial energy, heat, then you will save. And Yi Tao doesn't go into that with his own mirror.
I see.
But he's still making the argument against a solar panel for the same reason. And that's the same albedo discussion of reflecting sunlight. It's going to change. The momentum exchange that happens is still going to be microwaves to Earth, redshift out. So you have more dense energy staying, and you're going to see that in momentum changing overall. To talk about that, you'd have to talk about how the atmosphere, we call it in thermodynamics and physics, it's isometric.
Mm-hmm.
There's some isometric equations. Professor Lewin has some nice descriptions about them. The atmosphere acts like one giant conductor, spongy conductor for all this stuff. You can't just have a particle up there that gets struck by sun and it doesn't affect the rest of the atmosphere. The force of the particle or photon hitting whatever you're reflecting from is still going to push on everything around it. And that's part of subatomic physics that often is left out of most discussions because there's no easy way to talk about it. Mostly.
Right.
So, no, yes, no.
Right. Well, and then we get into the fact that the system that we're talking about is gigantic, right? And the things that are the interplay of all the parts is so complicated and gigantic, right? It's hard to know what. I mean, even in climate science, I think that right? Scientists don't necessarily they understand the basic premise of what's going on, even on on a convoluted level that she or maybe even you are explaining to people. But we still don't understand like how the seeking balance part, or that we don't really understand. There's positive feedback loops, right? And there are negative feedback loops too. And we don't necessarily understand how all of it really works. Would that be a true statement?
In a way, yes and no. You can't predict what's going to happen. You can certainly understand the limiting first principles physics and where they match both from the fundamental level to the Newtonian level. And you can go, these are unquestionable things. What's going to happen on the way to the next change of state where it's imbalance? Right. That's what you're saying. And no, at some point, there has to be a switchover where you don't have a changing rate of exchange between the zones she's talking about, because we have a constant income from the sun and a constant gravimetric relationship to the solar system. Where does that happen? Anywhere it does is not good for life, because like a boiling kettle, it's like, at what point does the rate of steam going out match the rate of microwaves coming in at a constant level and rate?
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
Right.
And if we haven't reached it yet, well, we better put on the brakes somehow, because it's going to be from simmer to boil in a higher and higher zone, which means her level of cooling is going to expand outward, or our level of mass is going to be under more pressure inward. And probably it's a combination of both. That's what you're really asking. And then the physics gets crazy and you need supercomputers to tell you what you want to really know. Because what we want to know is dates, times, and which system's going to grab us first. And no, I don't know that.
Right. And it's, in an even more simplified way. Like I think we can all see the trend line where the thing is going, right? The trend line on the graph is going this in a certain direction, and there's no indication that it's going to just go straight back down, back to normal, right, back to where it was 200 years ago.
No way.
There's no indication of that. And
no way.
We may get a pause, right, or we may get pauses along the way. We may get, reprieves, I guess, because because of a negative feedback here or there, right?
Not globally, but regionally, yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a good explanation from what's her name? Again, I always forget her name. Professor from Massachusetts who explains why the ice cap in the Arctic hasn't melted yet, and because of a negative feedback.
Well, on one side, on the other side, it's accelerated greatly, and from underneath, it's accelerated exponentially. And again, she doesn't talk about a lot of the stratification in the oceans, and she doesn't talk about increasing pressure, which is causing Swiss cheesing in the entire Arctic,
right,
from underneath. And
right.
And I don't see that in any of her writings or talks.
Right.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but she was just giving a very simple explanation, or what they thought was happening, why it had, because by all accounts, it probably should be gone by now. Right?
In certain ways, yes, and in certain ways, no. It just, again, depends on how much the ocean can take up. Mm-hmm. And then you've got, there's so much complexity for someone to say definitively of why that's happened. I'm not going to go out on that limb, but I will say that we have affected the patterns of all of our movements, even planetarily. So to know the answer definitively gets into a quagmire. And I think people that make overt statements like, well, we've had a pause here, without including what I said in that discussion, and I'm sure I could add more if I worked on it, because I'm new to this game as well as far as the climate. This is just the last 10 years of my experience. And I keep adding more and more, and I keep watching people. Some of them are adding less and less, and some of them are adding more and more, and a lot of them stop right here and draw a line. Like,
right.
No, you can talk about how the moon changes its rate of rotation back and forth involved in what we're talking about right now. That's a lot of energy. And to say that this pause is a pause that is a good thing in any way, I think you're seeing orbital shifts that are just the opposite of that. And this is just a side effect. And that side of the glacier she's talking about, of Antarctica, that's really overshadowed by the losses overall, right, by a long ways. We can talk about individual bodies of ocean that are cooling as well, here and there.
Sure.
And it's the same thing. You're just seeing a greater capacitance for stratification. When it's the lone wolf that's experiencing that, that means the next time around it accelerates way faster, generally speaking.
Right. Well, and it's the same with the polar vortex thing that's happening, right? Where
exactly
you're getting all of a sudden it's colder than it's ever been, right? Or it's just colder than usual a lot in a place that's usually kind of warm. And it's like, well, that doesn't, that's super regional. That's super very, that's like a extremely localized effect of something that's happening planetarily. That if you didn't understand what's happening planetarily, well, then of course you're going to be like, "Where's that global warming? Thought we were having global warming." It was like, well, yeah, in the Arctic, it's 100 and if you wanted to compare how hot it is in the Arctic to where it should be, the Arctic is 150 degrees right now, right? Like you're experiencing colder than usual temperatures, but in the Arctic, it's comparatively, right, from where it's supposed to be, it's effing hot, right? Like if the temperature anomalies is what I'm trying to say. Right?
Exactly.
Like if you were going to have a 6C temperature anomaly, in the place where you lived, let's say in the spring or the summer, it would be like it would be 150 degrees, right? So it would be like, oh, this is fucked up. This is really fucked up. Well, yeah, that's what the Arctic is experiencing right now.
There you go.
Yeah.
So if you want to, the easiest way for anybody to really see this is is the Earth turning more red from looking at it, or more blue? Because more blue, it's taking in more microwave energy and able to balance with that. Less blue, it's doing that less. So it's overall heating. To argue about which points are colder and which side of the glacier is hanging on and which side's going faster, that's like sitting on a cornflake in a boiling kettle of water going, well, that side looks like it's got bigger bubbles, this side's safe still.
Right.
I think it's insane, personally. But I wanna bridge the gap somehow.
Right. Well, I don't think she was. Yeah, I mean, I think people are just trying to explain like why, and on any level is I think it's trying to explain why something hasn't happened yet, right? When we all thought it was going to happen earlier, right? So it's just a matter of like, well, hasn't happened yet. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Yes, I think she's saying it with a very delicate, politically correct tone, and I think we're past that.
Yeah.
Is I guess where I'm at. I think you're at the same place with that.
Well, somebody was saying that this woman Nadine, what's her name again? Is it Sabine?
Remember.
Sabine. Sorry, I was going to call her. I was going to call her Nadine. Somebody was saying that she thinks that humans will. I don't know. Way back in the chat, somebody was saying she's full of hopium for the planet or something. I don't know. Is that right?
She is not quite over the cliff on the whole thing's coming apart.
So she doesn't think we're done and dusted yet. She doesn't. She thinks like we're going to get out of it.
Well, I heard her talk about nuclear power and how she would have no problem living next to a nuclear waste processing place, and yeah, I don't think she fully grasps the nearness of our demise. But I think doing videos like what she did here is going to bridge that gap for her on its own. So I'm really excited to see her do stuff like that because she is quite intelligent.
Yeah, and I think she is willing to like dive into the science of it all.
Oh yeah, she. I think some of these videos are personal trolling on people like me, and I enjoy it. This one's not. This one is like, oh, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't think she's ever looked at some of this. Same as me. You're stuck in these lab environments.
Well, that's the problem with that. That is one of the problems with scientists is the specialization and the myopic kind of like, attitude towards science and your understanding of it. It's weird to me because they don't. Right, they have a big problem kind of taking a worldview and kind of connecting things on a big on a macro level, right? Because they're so micro level on certain particular processes.
I have wrestled with what you just said greatly since my awakening, as it were, and I personally did not go back to finish any of my stuff because of this very topic. I think it's twofold. I'm disappointed because I think people in that station, it's their responsibility to be well versed in philosophical things and current affairs. And they are supposed to be the vanguard on the global issues. And I don't think they're doing that or have done that well at all. However, as a caveat, I've also become aware of an underlying organization that's global, or two or three of them, that include a lot of the same people and some different ones. And they are aware. And in the academic realm, on their behalf, if I didn't read and ask questions going through it, I'd still be there, maybe, really comfortable.
Yeah.
And much more respected and paid than I am now.
Right.
So do I don't know how to address my personal feelings so well on all of them, but a lot of them, I just think it's really hard to look outside of the box you're in, especially if you're so rewarded and well thought of. And once you start rattling that, the money goes away quickly. The publishing goes away quickly.
Sure. Right. I mean, right. You're, a lot of people's jobs rely on not understanding things.
And are they aware of that?
Once you start understanding things, then and I think that we've seen, we've seen a lot of people come up against that already, and I think so there's also like an academia issue. There's a societal issue. There's a social political issues. There's emotional, personal, internal. Right. I think a lot of humans understand what's going on. They just don't want to go there. Right. They've just come up against it. Well, they're it's an interesting thing in humans because there are some people who don't have this gigantic theoretical or whatever academic training, right? And big large brains and big understanding of things that are going on and but cannot actually take on certain truths about what's going on, right? They live in a state of denial about certain things because it's too scary to go there, right? So it doesn't have anything to do with your mind and how intelligent you are, but if you have an emotional block, then you're not going to be able to see around certain things, right? You're going to set up roadblocks in your own understanding in order to not go to a certain place. And there are other people who are not, other people who are just laymen or people who are not, as well degreed, who are completely capable of going like, I can see that for what it is, right? I see that truth for what it is. And there are so many layers and complexity of like why it is people are willing to understand something or not understand something that have a lot to do with like, have little to do with their intelligence and a lot more to do with other things that are going on.
It really does. It's really got to do with how okay you are with how you live and how attached you are to that. I was in a conference call yesterday, philosophical discussion that of course goes in against what we're talking about. You always end up here, right? With theoretical physics and where our place in the universe is with it. And anybody that's educated, smart, not educated, doesn't matter. You're going to come up against what's okay, what can't be true for you to be okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you're really saying.
Yeah, and and we all have that. I have blocks like that in my life. I'm pretty free. I'm pretty free, like mentally and emotionally. Like I will go to a lot of places that a lot of other people won't go to. But even I have. It's like with all the I guess quote unquote knowledge I have about so many things going on, it is actually difficult for me to think about really like putting myself out there to shake up the system, or to try and change things, or to like there's still a wall for me about like, well, is it worth that? Or is it, or I know that I could probably, I know that I could probably like turn the meter, push the dial or push the meter a couple of degrees if I wanted to, put myself out there, in a way that would like, try to forcefully kind of change people's minds about what's going on, or I don't know. It's very broad what I'm saying, but you know what I mean. So I have an issue. And that's just an emotional, personal thing. Like I can't, it's hard for me to get into a space of really like thinking about that. And so,
well, your life, you could get hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So right, and that's what I think is behind what a lot of people are willing, why a lot of people are willing to accept certain things as being true or not true, or likely or not likely, is because, well, I might get hurt if I actually try to go out and understand this.
Yes.
Or if I take the side of understanding this, if I actually get on the side of going, yep, this is what it is, right?
I oscillate with that myself. How can you not?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I haven't figured that out. When you do, let me know, because I really would like to know.
Well, and it's also, there's another, and I hate this, and hate is a strong word, but it's true of myself and true of other people, which is like, well, you're not going to actually end up changing any outcomes. So what's the point of putting yourself through pain? Yeah. And that's the thing I have.
Right.
That's the thing I have an issue with, is like, well, I don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know, maybe the universe is waiting on you, right. Or you and people like you to go, oh, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't just sit around and wait for things to happen,
And isn't that just the scariest thought of all, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's on me. It's on me.
It's on me. It's on us. It's on, and that's absolutely the truth. But like, that's still a lot of truth to like hang out with, So.
I did think of a way to talk about reflecting.
Okay. Yes, please give it to us because somebody is asking you.
Okay.
Somebody actually was still asking you. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me go back. Let me go back and keep that in mind. Reflect the Sun says, how far will light go when it hits an object with 95 to 98% reflectance from the Earth? Dr. Tao's science in presentations at Harvard showed it can get back to space.
See, but not without losing momentum. So let's talk about momentum. So if you're on a merry-go-round, right? And you're on the edge of the merry-go-round, and you go around and around and around, and someone's outside the merry-go-round, and at one particular spot, they throw the ball from one spot. And that ball has to bounce off whatever you're holding in your hand and go back outward without affecting any of the spin that you feel from the merry-go-round. That's what we're talking about. And Dr. Tao does not talk about that. He talks about the ability to reflect the ball outward as the ball. Well, let's say the ball now gets smaller as it goes out for every amount of momentum that it loses after it strikes whatever you're holding to reflect it outward. That's going to depend on how much force the ball hits you, at what angle, and at what speed you're spinning in deference to the ball, with relation to the ball, away from, towards, etc. Follow that?
Yeah.
So everything hits a mirror, same rules apply. Photons are just like the ball, they just adhere to much trickier mathematics. That's all. It's still the same. And Dr. Tao isn't exactly accounting for that part. Even in a vacuum, you're going to lose that part of the energy, the momentum of the ball hitting the mirror or whatever you're holding. And it's a lot more complicated than that because his mirrors are sitting on the surface with an atmosphere above them.
Right. So there's the interaction of that energy to the mirror and back out.
There you go.
And there's an absorption from the mirrors and from everything in between, right?
Including gravity, which acts like a stretch on the mass that would be the photon if photons had mass. It's just momentum. But that gets into some really heady discussions if you really want to understand it, because light's not really traveling anywhere. It's the wave that makes the light that's traveling, nothing but EM tension sort of moving. And that's what we're all having problems with in these discussions. And that's why not everybody designs tiny computer chips.
Right. And last thing I guess I'll ask you, I got to wrap this up, but last thing I'll ask you is, what do you think about kicking up some dust from the moon, or placing mirrors on the outside of the atmosphere, or dusting the outside of the atmosphere? How would that work?
Same way. You have to conserve the momentum of all the stuff it took to put it there, all the stuff it takes to keep it there. Even spinning of the Earth, as little as it seems, it's still drawing down on both the electromagnetic field of the Earth and the atmosphere. You're going to have a shadow wave from everything you put in orbit around the Earth, including dust. And eventually, it's coming back down with more energy, right? It's going to accelerate. It's a payoff, right? You've got a delayed, like a heat pump. You're still pumping energy into the heat pump to make it cold. You're just exhausting the heat someplace else. This is a different argument, but it's still about momentum that's going to end up in Earth. So even if it has a temporary, like, masking effect, you're just distributing that momentum in a different way. That's going to come back and haunt you in exactly the same way as you started. You don't get a free ride.
Got it.
And I think that doesn't mean they're not going to do it. They're going to do whatever keeps them looking at civilization as the reality.
Right. I was going to talk about all the UFO sightings today, but we were running out of time. Yeah, maybe we'll have to talk about it tomorrow.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. It does make sense. There wouldn't be a payoff. There wouldn't be a payoff from, putting something up in space that would reflect the light before it got into. You're still saying the momentum from the pushing of the things up into the atmosphere and keeping it up there.
Well, even so, you've got
that will create enough energy to offset whatever it is.
Basically, you can go with that. But even so, you've got microwave energy coming in. It is not going to be stopped by all that.
It's not going to be stopped by the microwave oven. Right. Got it. Yeah.
Lids don't stop your food from cooking in the microwave.
Mm-hmm. Right. Got it. So there, that's a big flaw. That's a big hole in the theory.
Flaw.
Yeah.
Big flaw, and it's really frustrating to hear those big solutions. Is like, okay, where's all the theoretical physicists to come in on this and explain how this can't happen that way? Because engineers are going crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
is how it looks.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for explaining or attempting to explain what's going on. I think that was cool. That was a cool discussion. I feel like I you know what, everything that you say too is interesting. I gotta I get the basic idea of the the moving around of the mass and the energy, and that's the displacement that we have been doing to the planet being a big part of the energy balance, the energy equation, right? And there was actually a fellow that used to be in the chats and basically saying exactly the same thing. It's just we've moved all this stuff out from the core of the earth, and we've really messed up. Like, we have to find a way to put it all back, but we can't really do that.
It's quite a predicament, isn't it?
Yeah.
I hope your audience doesn't hate you or me for everything I say.
Yeah,
it's a downer.
It is a downer. No, I mean, I think the audience is perfectly fine with the downer, but whatever. Or they understand it. They understand it for what it is. I mean, I if anybody gets upset in the chat, it's at me when I'm saying, well, but if we did this and this and this, because I like to engage in those kinds of mental exercises, right? And people get really mad at me for engaging in the mental exercise of like, well, here would be the, if there were a roadmap, this would be the roadmap. They don't like to hear that.
Well, let's do that one next time.
Okay, sure, I'm down.
I would much rather talk about the roadmap on where to go. Absolutely. There is a roadmap. It just doesn't mean we get to be, like you always say, we don't get to do what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. We'd have to really give that up. We'd have to give up our expectations. So, manage our expectations. All right, man. Thanks for coming on. I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate it. I'm going to take this call from William. How you doing, William? What's going on?
Can you hear me, Kev?
Yes.
First, thanks so much, both of you, for doing that. I am totally lost, but I'll listen again and again. Joseph, I really appreciate your stories and try and put it in layman's terms. I think you guys are both super smart, and you're trying to help us lay people kind of get a grip on things. Really appreciate it. I Kev, as far as the knowing and what to do, I mean, honestly, we're not going to get a grip on the military-industrial congressional complex, which contributes the vast majority of the pollutants, as we know, and what's not even accounted for, and nor the top 1%. Do you follow me? So yeah. I'm not a defeatist. I'm just trying to be realistic. And that what I'm trying to say is you can't weigh yourself down, I think, with you have the responsibility, because there's no way you or me or Joseph are going to make that change.
Well, and it's almost a little bit it's a little what's the word? It's a little presumptuous, right? It's kind of a savior complex, right? Oh, I'll do it. I'll save the planet. I'm totally not engaged in that kind of thinking anymore, right? Anymore. I used, when I was younger, and everybody's, everybody has the Messiah complex. Not everybody, but it's a common occurrence in people's brains, right? To have a Messiah complex sometime in their life. I'll change the planet, right? I'll change society for the better. I'll do it. We're gonna do it, and that's fine. That's actually a pretty altruistic impulse. I have nothing against people that have that impulse. You just have to know that you're a part of the equation. You aren't the equation. You're a part of the puzzle, if you can possibly be a part of the puzzle, and you want to be a positive part of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is why I'm doing this channel. I feel like this is the, you know, the least I could do, even though there are days when I feel like I'm doing too much, even with the channel. Right? There are a lot of days when I feel like I should just shut it down and just go enjoy myself and do something else.
Well,
but whatever.
For me, I really appreciate what you do, and so I hate to see that happen. And I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. So, you know, I'd like to see you keep doing it. And
well, and I also just feel like that communication is actually pretty freaking important. You know, as far as like changing how people look at the world and think about themselves or think about their place in the world or the universe or whatever. And then we have the capacity for increased communication. You know, we have the tools now to actually discuss things on a deeper, you know, whatever, deeper, truer, higher level now, you know, with our communication tools. And so, you know, this is, it is important. It is important to have, you know, ideas are dangerous, right? To the people in power, right? That's why they kept slaves from reading. Or from learning, you know, it's why they didn't want people to learn to know things. Or back in the day, back in the day when the church, you know, only the clergy could have access to the books and the knowledge and the reading, but not the parishioners, right? You were not supposed to know things, because that's how you keep people in control. So, you know, the communication and ideas are very powerful, and so.
You know, I think in the movie "It's a Wonderful Life," Francis Ford Coppola, Jimmy Stewart, Donna Reed, and Clarence. You never know who you touch and who you reach, and who may be a future scientist someday who heard your message and Joseph's, and it sparked their interest. And you never know. So
exactly.
God bless you guys, and I know you're on a roll. So thank you.
Thanks, William. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye.
All right, y'all. Thanks for hanging out with us. Talking about some different things today than the news stories, but this is a pretty good news story to talk about, I think, or these are good things to talk about. Understanding what's really happening to the planet on a much, you know, larger level. And thanks for hanging out and listening, y'all. All right. Well, I'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk about more pedestrian, I guess, you know, everyday kind of things tomorrow. We'll get back to some news stories. And we'll see you all at the regular time of 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until next time, peace.